In the forests of Uganda and Côte d'Ivoire, scientists uncovered a wild secret. Chimpanzees eat figs and plums that naturally ferment, giving them the equivalent of 2 cocktails a day. This study from UC Berkeley and partners confirms the long-debated drunken monkey hypothesis. Deep in the tropical forests of Uganda and Côte d'Ivoire, researchers noticed something peculiar about wild chimpanzees. Every day, chimps crowded into the highest branches of fig trees or gathered on the forest floor around plum-like fruit. It was not unusual for them to eat fruit, but what stood out was their behavior. They seemed unusually fixated on certain ripe, soft fruits that carried a distinct sweet and fermented smell. Locals who lived near the forest often joked that the animals looked a little tipsy after long feasts, and some even claimed to have seen chimps stumble or rest in odd positions afterward. Scientists from UC Berkeley and collaborating institutions wondered whether there was any truth to the idea. Could these wild primates actually be consuming alcohol every single day without anyone realizing it? If so, how much alcohol were they really taking in? The mystery grew when the team realized that ripe tropical fruits often ferment naturally due to yeast living on their skins. That fermentation produces ethanol, the same type of alcohol found in beer, wine, and spirits. To solve the mystery, researchers decided to test the fruits the chimps ate most often. But turning this idea into a scientific study was not simple. The forest is a difficult laboratory. Instruments needed to measure alcohol content are sensitive and fragile. But in Uganda and Côte d'Ivoire, humidity was relentless. Electronic equipment corroded quickly. Power sources were unreliable, so researchers relied on small solar panels just to keep their tools working. Carrying supplies through dense jungle terrain was exhausting. Yet over 3 long research seasons, the team hauled their equipment from site to site, carefully collecting fruit samples from the exact trees and groves the chimps were eating. Each piece of fruit had to be tested quickly before it spoiled in the tropical heat. Researchers calibrated their test kits on site, sometimes under tarps stretched between trees to shield them from sudden rain. It was a battle of patience and precision. For every handful of figs or plums eaten by chimps, samples were weighed, measured, and analyzed. What looked to locals like ordinary fruit turned out to be chemically fascinating. Slowly, the researchers began to piece together a picture of just how much alcohol was naturally present in the chimps' daily diet. By the end of the first phase of their research, the team had gathered an enormous dataset of fruit samples, each tied to observations of chimp feeding behavior. The initial numbers suggested something remarkable. The fruit was not only ripe and sugary, but consistently contained measurable amounts of ethanol. What began as a strange rumor of drunken animals was about to become a serious scientific finding. The chimps were not binging like partygoers, but their daily diet contained enough alcohol to raise profound questions about evolution, biology, and even the roots of human drinking culture. After 3 seasons of testing, the scientists finally had solid numbers. On average, the fruit favored by chimps contained 0.3% alcohol by weight. That might sound tiny, barely stronger than kombucha or slightly fizzy apple juice, but numbers can be deceiving. Chimps do not eat just 1 or 2 pieces of fruit. A healthy adult chimp can easily devour 10 pounds of fruit in a single day. Multiply that intake by the alcohol concentration, and suddenly the picture shifts. These wild animals were consistently ingesting measurable amounts of ethanol without even realizing it. To make sense of the data, researchers compared chimp consumption to human drinking. Chimps usually weigh around 90 pounds, and at their typical intake levels, they were absorbing roughly 14 grams of ethanol every day. For humans, that is the equivalent of drinking 2 cocktails daily. Imagine someone sitting down each evening to a couple of gin and tonics or margaritas. For chimps, this routine was not occasional. It was simply part of their everyday diet. Of course, the image of tipsy chimps swaying in the trees is more cartoon than science. To actually reach a drunken state, chimps would have to gorge on an absurd amount of fermented fruit, stuffing themselves until their bellies ballooned uncomfortably. The alcohol present in their diet is delivered in small, steady amounts rather than in binges. Instead of drunken escapades, what chimps experience is a mild, constant exposure to ethanol, almost like a natural background buzz from their food supply. This steady intake is important. Low doses of alcohol affect metabolism and digestion in subtle ways. For chimps, ethanol could act as a mild stimulant, encouraging them to eat more and process calories faster. It may even help them identify the ripest fruit, since ethanol signals fermentation and sugar content. Researchers suggested that alcohol acts almost like a beacon, guiding chimps toward the most energy-rich food. Unlike humans, who often consume alcohol for social or recreational reasons, chimps are simply following their instincts to survive. When the numbers were first crunched, even the scientists were stunned. They expected to find traces of ethanol, but not amounts equivalent to 2 cocktails per day. Some even questioned whether the findings were accurate until repeated tests confirmed the results. The realization sparked excitement and controversy in equal measure. Were chimps deliberately seeking out boozy fruit, or was this all just an accidental side effect of evolution? The discovery set the stage for the next big idea, the theory that alcohol consumption among primates is no accident but part of a much deeper evolutionary story. Back in the year 2000, UC Berkeley professor Robert Dudley introduced what he called the drunken monkey hypothesis. His theory was bold and simple. Humans' love for alcohol is not a cultural accident, but an evolutionary inheritance. According to Dudley, our ancestors were fruit eaters, just like today's chimps. Wherever there were ripe fruits, there was fermentation, and wherever there was fermentation, there was ethanol. Over time, primates may have evolved not only tolerance for this substance, but also a strong attraction to it. The idea gained traction because ethanol carries a powerful message in nature. Fermented fruit tends to be rich in sugar and calories, exactly what primates seek for survival. In a forest full of plants, the faint scent of ethanol could guide an animal toward food that is energy-dense and ready to eat. Instead of being a dangerous toxin, alcohol in small doses became a helpful signal. Dudley argued that primates with a natural attraction to ethanol may have been better at finding ripe fruit, giving them a survival advantage. If this attraction shaped primate evolution, then it could also explain human behavior today. Why do humans around the world brew beer, ferment grapes into wine, or distill spirits? Why does alcohol play such a strong role in celebration, ritual, and daily life? Dudley suggested the answer lies in our evolutionary past. We are, in a sense, drunken monkeys ourselves, descendants of fruit-loving ancestors whose biology wired us to enjoy ethanol long before the first human discovered fermentation intentionally. Dudley often explained the connection in simple terms. Once you start eating, alcohol acts as an aperitif, he said. In other words, it stimulates appetite and encourages continued feeding. For chimps, this might mean eating more figs and plums. For humans, it might mean finishing a meal with a glass of wine or enjoying a beer before dinner. The same biological mechanism could be at work in both species, showing that our cultural habits are rooted in something far older than civilization. The drunken monkey hypothesis is not just about chimps or about science in the lab. It resonates because it touches something universal. Every culture on Earth has some form of alcohol. Whether it is rice wine in Asia, palm wine in Africa, mead in Europe, or beer in the Americas, humans have always found ways to ferment sugars into ethanol. Dudley's idea ties all of this back to a single evolutionary thread. We inherited the taste for alcohol from our fruit-eating ancestors. The chimps in Uganda and Côte d'Ivoire are not just eating fruit. They are living evidence of the very same story that shaped us. Chimpanzees are not alone in their quiet relationship with alcohol. Across the globe, scientists have recorded dozens of animals taking advantage of naturally fermented food and drink. What begins with fruit fermenting on the ground or in the canopy often turns into a natural bar, where creatures of all shapes and sizes line up for a taste. The attraction seems universal. Where there is sugar turning into alcohol, animals are not far behind. Perhaps the most famous story comes from Africa, where elephants have been observed eating fermented marula fruits. Local legends tell of elephants swaying side to side after these feasts, their enormous bodies unsteady, their behavior unusually playful. Scientists debate whether the animals are truly intoxicated or simply overstuffed with fruit, but the fascination remains. Elephants, weighing several tons, would need to consume an enormous amount of ethanol to become fully drunk, yet the attraction to marula fruit persists. It mirrors the same evolutionary signal found in chimps. Fermented fruit means calories. In Panama, spider monkeys have been caught eating large quantities of naturally fermented palm fruit. Researchers have even documented measurable alcohol levels in their urine after feeding. In Southeast Asia, slow lorises sip nectar that ferments inside flowers, exposing them to steady doses of ethanol. Lemurs in Madagascar have been filmed deliberately choosing fruits that have started to ferment, their noses guiding them toward the faint scent of alcohol. All of these behaviors echo the same pattern. Fruit-eating primates have learned to follow ethanol like a compass pointing toward food. Even tiny animals are drawn to alcohol. Fruit flies are perhaps the most obvious example. Open a beer outside, and almost instantly a fruit fly appears, homing in on the ethanol vapors with incredible precision. For them, alcohol is not just a drink, but a signal of their preferred habitat. Birds too have been seen feeding on fermented berries, sometimes with consequences. In northern climates, waxwings and robins occasionally consume so many fermented berries that they appear disoriented, flying into windows or stumbling on the ground. These incidents highlight that nature's relationship with alcohol spans from the tiniest insect to the largest mammal. What unites all these stories is the same theme. Ethanol is more than just a chemical. It is a biological signal, one that crosses species and continents. From elephants in Africa to monkeys in the Americas, from insects buzzing over beer to birds pecking at fermented berries, countless creatures are drawn to alcohol in one form or another. Chimpanzees are simply the latest reminder that humans are not unique in this attraction. We are part of a larger natural story, one where alcohol is written into the diets and instincts of animals everywhere. After the long days in the forest, after all the fruit samples and careful measurements, scientists were left with a simple but profound question. Were the chimpanzees deliberately seeking out fruit because of its alcohol content, or were they just after sugar and calories, with alcohol being an accidental bonus? The study could not prove intention, but it made one fact clear. Day after day, chimps are consuming measurable amounts of ethanol, enough to match what a human would get from 2 cocktails. That cannot be dismissed as coincidence. Robert Dudley and his colleagues believe this finding sheds light on human behavior. Why do humans all over the world seem so drawn to alcohol? From rice wine in Asia to beer in Europe, from palm wine in Africa to mead in ancient cultures, alcohol is nearly universal. The answer may be rooted not in culture, but in biology. Just like chimps, our ancestors relied on fruit. Just like chimps, they learned to associate the scent and taste of ethanol with ripe, energy-rich food. Over time, that preference carried forward into human societies. Even though modern humans no longer depend on foraging for figs or plums, the biological wiring still remains. Dudley argues that once alcohol is present, the urge to consume quickly is built in. This evolutionary bias may explain why alcohol can be both pleasurable and dangerous for humans. It is not just a social activity, but a deep-rooted instinct that once helped our ancestors survive. The drunken monkey is not a metaphor. It is a biological truth written into our shared history with other primates. The chimpanzee study also serves as a warning. Small, steady doses of alcohol are harmless for chimps and possibly even beneficial, stimulating feeding and guiding them to ripe fruit. But for humans, with access to distilled beverages and unlimited supplies, the evolutionary bias can turn against us. What once was a helpful signal in the forest can become a temptation in the city. Dudley and other researchers suggest that understanding this connection may help us rethink our relationship with alcohol today. In the end, the story of boozy chimps is more than a curiosity. It is a reminder of how deeply connected humans remain to the natural world. From forests in Africa to bars in New York, alcohol links us to our primate relatives in surprising ways. The chimps of Uganda and Côte d'Ivoire are not party animals swinging drunkenly from the trees, but their steady exposure to ethanol reveals a truth about ourselves. We are all part of an ancient lineage of fruit eaters, shaped by the same evolutionary forces, carrying the same taste for alcohol that began in the canopy of the forest millions of years ago. This is the end of that story. Now tell me in the comments, what's your most unbelievable story? I'll read out the funniest ones in the next video. Do not forget to hit a like button and subscribe. See you.